abduhu wa rasuluh, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, to our respected non-Muslim guests who may be tuning into this broadcast live or who will see it later, I begin in our traditional greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum. And I say welcome to this edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan over the Salam Media Network. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news, we tell you what you can do about it. And I'm very pleased and honored to be a part of this network family. And I'm especially pleased to have as my guest today a very dear friend, an American-born Muslim. We met in New York years ago, and we've always had this very close brotherly relationship ever since, mashallah. Our guest today is Brother Cyrus McGoldrick. He was born in the United States of Irish and Iranian descent, of Irish-Iranian parentage. He graduated with a BA in Middle Eastern and South Asian and African Studies from Columbia University in 2010. He has a master's in civilization studies at the Alliance of Civilizations Institute at Ibn Khaldun University in 2018. He's a PhD candidate, and he's a writer with a number of publications under his belt. Our dear brother has been in Turkey with his family for the past 5 years. And I think the last time we saw each other was maybe a year ago when he was here on a very brief visit home. We spent, a little bit of time together. It was time well spent, alhamdulillah. And now Salam Media brings us together in this platform for what will no doubt be a very thought-provoking conversation. Welcome, my brother. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Thank you so much. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. It's a pleasure to speak with you always, and I'm glad that inshallah we can share the love that we have also with a live audience too.
Indeed.
So thank you for having me. Yes.
Alhamdulillah, my pleasure, brother. Let's begin with a little personal information. How is the family? How are you doing? How is the family doing? And has it grown, Aki? I know there was this one little daughter, this precious little daughter.
Yeah.
Has it grown?
That one daughter has grown, and her personality is the personality of a small army. Alhamdulillah. Actually, we broke fast about an hour and a half ago here in Istanbul, and tried to put her to sleep when we were doing the test. The sound check for this conversation, she ran in and got up into the camera, but I think she should be sleeping now. But alhamdulillah, we're good. Our family's good. I'm here with my wife, my daughter, my sister-in-law lives with us here as well. We have most of our families are split between the U.S. and Iran. But alhamdulillah, obviously these are difficult times for everyone. In Iran, especially, it has been hit really hard by this pandemic. My grandparents are there. May Allah protect them. But alhamdulillah, I really can't complain. Allah is very generous, is very kind. With whatever hardship comes from it, we've seen such beauty, also, and we're making the best of it. And now to have Ramadan, to be blessed, to see Ramadan, and to fast it. May Allah accept. Just very grateful to be able to continue what we do.
This pandemic, brother, how is it affecting Turkey?
We've been about on the same timeline, I think, as far as when we first started the social distancing. So we started closing, for example, our schools. I'm in a PhD program as well here. We went online about a month ago, maybe a little bit more than a month ago now. You know, a lot of the a lot of life here has slowed down, and people are mostly staying home. We're now finishing our second multi-day like quarantine, like actual, you know, curfew for staying home. We did 2 days last week and 4 days this week. Mostly, from what we understand, it seems to be relatively under control. You know, it hasn't really caused the widespread death, you know, that we saw in either Iran or in parts of the United States, alhamdulillah, or Italy, you know, God forbid. Turks are generally taking it pretty seriously. You know, obviously it's a slow start. No one was really sure what to believe in the first weeks, you know, of all of this, of course, and that's understandable as well. But alhamdulillah, you know, it seems Turkey seems to be able to manage it. It's a good reminder also, you know, to give credit where it's due. To give credit where it's due, you know, Turkey has a great healthcare system and a great public healthcare system, you know, such that even we are not citizens, you know, we're just residents, are able to go to the hospital, you know, because of, you know, an accident even that we had in the house. We were able to take an ambulance, be in the hospital all day in the emergency room to get medications and CAT scans, and then to walk out at the end of the day without paying one penny, without paying 1 cent.
So Turkey,
Yeah.
a Muslim country,
Yeah.
that certain elements within the international political establishment
Of course.
love to dog at any opportunity they get,
Yeah, that's right.
has universal health care.
Universal healthcare, you know, and you know,
Yes.
of course there are the private options as well. You know, I know there's always
Yeah.
the fear mongering about socialism and whatever.
Yeah.
But Turkey's a great example, you know, of what's possible. You know, and so, you know, even the numbers that came out last week, and I know the New York Times, you know, got into a little war of words, you know, with the Turkish government suggesting that maybe they weren't being fully honest about the numbers of cases, and you know, it's hard to tell. Obviously, you know, it's impossible for us to know. But the government said, you know, honestly, we have so many beds. You know, our capability has been developed over so many years now that the health minister, you know, said that we're only really at 30% capacity right now. I mean, excuse me, we're only using 30% of our capacity to deal with this coronavirus situation. So alhamdulillah, may Allah protect it. May Allah protect all of us. It's honestly, when the pandemic first broke, you know, we were having serious conversations, of course, with our families, you know, around the world, friends trying to decide, you know, what's best, you know, for us, for our daughter, for, you know, our families, for our parents and grandparents. But when it came down to, you know, what we would do for our own sakes, honestly, we felt so much safer here, you know, as American, you know, as of course, America is home in so many ways. But honestly, we felt so much more secure here. You know, the fabric of society here is so strong. There was none of the rushing to the stores and stockpiling basic necessities. You know, people really looked out for each other. People were, you know, very reasonable with each other. We haven't really seen any gaps, right, in getting basic needs here in the stores. You know, and people look out for each other. You know, people live with their families, right? So people aren't going to be fist fighting in the store over toilet paper, right? Because, you know, if I needed, I could knock on the next door neighbor and still ask for sugar, you know, as the old expression. This sounds antiquated now. I know this is a generation past, you know, that you could do something like this. But really, Turkish society is strong. People are strong, and there's still love. You know, there's still some solidarity here. So inshallah, we'll get through it, no matter what it is.
And what is the discussion like for the average man and woman on the street concerning what is taking place abroad, and especially in the United States? The United States has this tremendous footprint and influence on the world. You know,
absolutely.
What's the discussion like on the street concerning what's happening in the United States as a whole, and especially in the epicenter of this, New York City?
Right. I think there was two sides to it that I noticed. You know, that, you know, one was the realization early on of how bad America was being hit. You know, and to see America, you know, brought to its knees, you know, in such a way,
Mm-hmm.
by a virus, to buy
Yeah.
something that, we take for granted as something that can be, can be cured or something. This was really a shock to a lot of us. And I think Turks also, that was one of the things, especially because there weren't as many cases early on, to see
Mm-hmm.
America really taking this seriously, to see
Yeah.
footage, of the hospitals in New York, may Allah protect everyone in them and everyone working in them, and around the country. I think that was really a shock. And I think that's maybe, in a way, that's one of the reasons that Turks started to take this virus more seriously than they might have,
Mm-hmm.
if
Mm-hmm.
this were only coming from the WHO or whatever. I think that was one side of it. But the other side of that too, I've noticed some appreciation, especially considering, the effect of the pandemic on economy, the effect on people's livelihoods. And again, like I mentioned, being able to go to the store and buy basic needs. I
Mm-hmm.
was talking to, um, some weeks ago, my mother was saying, who lives in Southern California, my mother was saying how difficult it was to even find flour, basic, flour,
Yeah.
in a store,
Mm-hmm.
and such that you couldn't even order it online and receive it within, a couple weeks, right? It was really shocking when we think about it, flour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, I mentioned it to one of our elders here in Turkey, and he was stunned. In America, the United States of America, you can't
Yeah.
find flour,
Yeah.
Um, and it's been a good reminder, and of course we can dig more into this. But the way that the Turkish economy has been built, I mean, Turkey has spent a lot of energy trying to make sure that they produce their own goods. Turkey has tried
Mm-hmm.
to import as little as possible. Turks, I think, are very conscious, and Turkey is a very nationalist country. I mean, this
Yeah.
last century, of course, uh, for worse and for better, of course. The
Mm-hmm.
Ataturk project here obviously is a very strong one.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but Turks, are very conscious about buying Turkish products, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so when, this broke, a part of the reason that the stores were not interrupted, part of the reason that, it wasn't a panic, right, is because the supply chains, many of them are within Turkey. Turkey produces its own toilet paper and flour and all of these things, and so because there wasn't this hoarding, because there wasn't
Yeah.
this stockpiling, life has been able to continue. Demand doesn't go up, right? Even in America, it's
Mm-hmm.
not that demand goes up for toilet paper. It's ridiculous. It's just people panicking, right? And
Right.
keeping
That's what it
everything that they
is.
can, so that they have an
Absolutely.
advantage over someone else. So I
Mm-hmm.
think these are the two sides anyway, in Turkey here, seeing how America was affected by this. But of course, it's not that I haven't seen any Turks pointing and laughing by any means. There's definitely, a human spirit. There's definitely a sense of solidarity. There's definitely prayers for the whole world. I mean, people aren't just praying for
Mm-hmm.
Turkey; people are praying for the whole world. Um, this is a species-wide experience, such that we have
Mm-hmm.
not had in decades, I think. And so, um, we'll see who has the human spirit, who has a human solidarity, and who is just looking out for their
Absolutely.
nation or their
That's right.
tribe. Yeah.
And brother, you're a brother who, by the grace of Allah Ta'ala, you have a very conscious awareness of what's happening in the United States and what's happening globally, and you have a
Mhm.
sensitivity for a lot of the stuff that's going on. What? How do you see these? What can we call them? These these populist political uprisings that have taken place
Yeah.
in different corners of the world,
Yeah.
all seeming to be feeding energy from this knucklehead in the White House here in
Yeah.
this country.
Yeah. It's true.
I
It's
mean,
true.
uh, what recently happened in India and what is still going on in India,
Right. Right.
what's been going on in Brazil, what's happening in the Philippines,
Right.
and the list goes on and on. I mean, what's
Yeah.
your take on all of this?
It's a big one. It's a huge topic, but something I do try to keep an eye on. I've been fascinated from Trump's first campaign,
Hmm.
and it was even less about Trump, although Trump deserves we should really meditate on Donald Trump. And he's an icon. You know, he's a type of politics that we have not seen
in a while.
Even in a long time. You know, of course,
Yes, it's been a long time. Yes,
maybe
yes.
Ronald Reagan, you know, had a similar type of charisma, but different, still different. Like nothing that we see.
He's got Reagan beat when it comes to certain
certain qualities,
parts of his personality.
Nicely said. But not only Trump, but Bannon. You know, I mentioned to you earlier, Steve Bannon. You know, who was such a big part of his campaign,
right?
And of course, they still catfight about who influenced who and who how that all ended. But I've spent some time trying to watch everything that Bannon says, because he's so he wears his politics on his sleeve. It's about economic right-wing nationalism, right-wing economic populism, populist nationalism. And this is someone who's actively supporting similar movements in Europe, for example. Nationalists, and nationalism in Europe basically means white nationalism. I think to add, and then to see them on the same stages as Modi, as the Indian prime minister, to see, and of course there's the usual suspects, right, of the Gulf countries and things like this. But this economic nationalism, this populist nationalism in particular, is especially concerning in the U.S. Because it's continued the shift, and it's pushed the country further to the right, and the left has not been able to develop the strength to resist that in any meaningful way, let alone what third option the Muslims might be able to provide. We're such a small, of course, part of the national conversation that's not even part of the discussion. We've watched from over decades now, the Republican Party fly to the right, to the neocon right, and Democrats follow them, basically, right? And I'm always concerned, in particular, with what this means for the war machine. I think that stopping governments from killing people, right, it should be our highest priority. And then
I agree.
And then ideally, killing and imprisoning and torturing, and then of course it would be a priority to get these governments to spend our taxes on positive things, on providing services, on basic services for people. But stopping the killing, is a priority. Right. And because of that, to be fair, there was a glimmer of hope, right, that Trump, for example, would lean more towards an isolationist, approach to global politics. There was, that glimmer, because once in a while, when he's speaking off the cuff, he'll say something that seems like it's what he believes, and then of course, all of his advisors rush to the podium and clarify and say that's not actually what he meant, and no, policy is not actually changing. The Pentagon goes for it. No, that's not actually, But to see, this is one example. These nationalisms, these populist nationalisms, is one example of the tribalism, which we're seeing a resurgence of, right? Right. And there's different forms that tribalism can take. We study. I'm in Ibn Khaldun University here in Istanbul. From our rector on down, we spent a lot of time, studying Ibn Khaldun, who, in his introduction to his study of history, lays out. It's a vision, right? It's a method of studying history, but also a purpose of studying history. But one of his concepts that he deals with is Asabiyyah, which from the Hadith, we understand to be a tribalism, which is a negative thing, right? Which is an immoral tribalism, right? To take the side of someone in our tribe, even if they're wrong. Right? But the way that Ibn Khaldun deals with Asabiyyah, right, is he talks about it as group solidarity, as a group dynamic that strengthens the tribe, that strengthens the group. And what Islam did for the tribes of the Arabian Peninsula was to give them a mega, Asabiyyah, to give them a greater Asabiyyah based on ethics, right? Not based on bloodlines, right? But based on ethics and shared solidarity. And you could argue, I think, convincingly, I think that the Islamic Asabiyyah is not even only for those who follow Islam, but it's an Asabiyyah for the human race, right? It's a global Asabiyyah, right? That we're not just called to serve each other, of course not, right? We're called to serve the oppressed, right? To serve all people, and this is khilafah, right? This is that spirit of khilafah, right? That we're supposed to manifest. But what we're seeing, and we see this in the Muslim world also. So we were speaking of Turkish nationalism. And of course, there are many Arab nationalisms and Iranian nationalisms, and around the Muslim world, we see these nationalist movements rise. And this is, I think, because of the absence of a sense of center, right, and a sense of shared, values and a shared vision, right. In the West, it's a slightly different monster, though, right, because the Western civilizational project, what united the West, right, wasn't really any shared vision of goodness. It was a shared vision of hating Islam, I think. It was very much an imperial one. The European project, right? The only thing that really stopped Europe from fighting each other, right, was being able to unite against the threat of Islam. What they saw, what European elites saw as the threat of Islam. Although, we know, of course, that Islam would have been much better for them. And so now, honestly, I'm not even sure, right, if an American nationalism is worse than the Western nationalism that you would find in like a Samuel Huntington, who's advocating for a civilizational level of thought, right? When I see things like Brexit in the UK, at one level, of course, we can be concerned because of how rooted that Brexit movement was in anti-Muslim bigotry, in xenophobia. Of course, that's real, and we should understand the context of that. But at the same time, we might see in that some benefits, to have Europe, dividing itself a little bit, and to not be able to act together against us, so effectively. To see the just weeks ago, again before the pandemic, but just weeks ago, there were articles, op-eds, in media across the Western world about westlessness.
About what?
Westlessness was the word that was being coined, right? And this was targeted at Trump, right? That they saw Trump as not being a Western team player, right? That he was choosing America over the shared Western solidarity of Europe, and not confronting China the way that, or not confronting Russia, really, is what some of the European governments were especially concerned about. And so it's mixed. It's a mixed bag, but it's especially concerning for Muslims in the West, and I'm very sympathetic. When we came to Turkey, part of our intention was hijrah, where we wanted to learn, right? But we wanted to establish our family, right, in a place where we were among Muslims, and treat this as home base, and we've made it home. But I'm very empathetic, to the Muslims that stayed, and of course it's still home. Of course we still, as we still come back every chance that we can, not just to see family, but to work, of course. The dawah, the movement work has to continue there. And nationalism in America is usually means to the exclusion of Muslims, to the exclusion of Black and Brown, to the exclusion of the poor. Even American nationalism for somehow becomes elite capitalist nationalism. The Bannon phenomenon is interesting because of his rhetoric about globalism, and his rhetoric about the globalist elites, right, who are who he sees as sending jobs overseas. But it's something that we're going to see more of now because of this pandemic, right? Right? Because especially now, the way that supply chains were interrupted, we're going to see a lot more of movements towards economic nationalism, I think, towards, bringing the jobs home, tariffs going up, things like that. Immigration being cut off, right? It's not entirely clear yet, unless I missed something, what Trump is going to do to follow up on his tweet last week about cutting stopping immigration entirely.
Right. Yeah.
But, you know, these are battles that we don't usually win.
Well, you know, I'm reminded by this pandemic and the response to it up until now of the ayah in the Quran where Allah Ta'ala says, you know, that shaitan plans, Allah's the best of planners.
Yeah.
You know, from day one, when this pandemic was beginning to be seen for what it was, something that was really, really serious and that would affect life as we knew it, both nationally and globally. My thoughts were that this is a punishing wake-up call.
Yeah.
This is a punishing wake-up call for the world. And a lot rests on, in the coming days and weeks and months, how we respond to this wake-up call. My prayer is that, you know, enough good-hearted people across the board of every, you know, of every tribe, of every creed, see this for the opportunity that it is. And respond accordingly. Because it is an opportunity. You know, there have been a number of, as tragic and unfortunate as this catastrophe is, and there's that other ayah in the Quran wherein Allah says, no calamity occurs except by the permission of Allah. No calamity occurs. And I often, in my writing and in my speeches, when I address the challenges facing America, my brother, I often reference, you know, two quote unquote giants of the East and the West. You know, the giant of the East that I referenced in this this argument that I make publicly is Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, who said civilization is based on justice and the consequences of oppression are devastating. Therefore, it is said, Allah aids the just state even if it is non-Muslim and withholds his help from the oppressive state even if it is Muslim. And then Thomas Jefferson, you know, you have these two figures. You have Jefferson many generations after Ibn Taymiyyah, who said, I tremble for my country when I reflect God is just. His justice cannot sleep forever. They were both basically saying the same thing.
Excellent. Yeah.
You know, there is a cause, there is a consequence, there's a cause and effect for, both for individuals and for nations. So here we are.
Excellent. Yeah.
You know, being reminded, you know, the most powerful militaries in the world, this superpower that boasts no one would dare make a frontal attack on America. Our military might is just too awesome. And we are a nation that has been in the habit for decades. I think I recently shared another piece by a former president, Jimmy Carter, where he noted that, you know, there's only been about 16 years. I think the number was 16 years in American history when we were not at war with another nation. SubhanAllah, man. SubhanAllah. That is something to think about.
And great to have someone like President Carter raise that,
to make that observation. That's right, brother. Yes. And it's a reminder. But so here we are. We have this military might that nations around the world fear, and yet we have been brought into a state of submission over something we cannot even see. No calamity occurs except by the permission of Allah. This is a wake-up call. This is a wake-up call. And one of the things that needs to happen is that more people of goodwill across the board need to work harder at reaching out to what is considered to be the quote-unquote base. The base of a Donald Trump and his party.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
reaching out to the base, because the base is base
Yeah.
blindly following his lead.
Yeah, that's
They're
right.
suffering.
That's right.
They're suffering.
The tribulation, this tribulation, the way that it's been able to strip away. I mean, really, we're talking about American exceptionalism, right? We're talking
Yes.
about this deep-seated belief, and this is not only held by Americans. Many people around the world think of America
Yes.
as exceptional, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of its own
Yes.
propaganda, of course.
That's right. Yes.
And what we're seeing as relative comforts, and opportunities. Again, for that to be stripped away, right, and to see the difficulty that Americans have had in, dealing with this crisis, it's a reminder of really the uselessness of a certain level of politics, even, right, or
Yeah.
political networks.
Yeah.
When all of the investments that we are called to make every 2-4 years, right, in the politics of Washington, D.C., amount to a stimulus package that has made billionaires more billions.
Yeah, that's right,
More
brother.
billions.
That's right.
While people are starving.
That's right.
In the streets of America, right? And you're absolutely right. I think, obviously racism is deep-seated in America, no question. But there are a lot of Americans who, out of ignorance, right, we can understand and empathize, but saw in Donald Trump someone that would fight for them. Right? And of course, we can laugh about it, and we can, say how ridiculous a belief this is. But again, comparing him to Hillary Clinton, right, who was the other option at the time, I can understand why so many Americans would choose Donald Trump over her. But it's a great opportunity, like you said, especially at the local level, at the hyper local level.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
We remember, right, that power is the ability, move people and to move money, right, and it's geographical, right. Despite all of the work that happens online, and certain types of work, I should say, that happen online, this is a great opportunity. Of course, people are going to be spending more time on screens than ever before, consuming more media probably than ever before. There are benefits and costs to that, of course. But when it comes to food, when it comes to shelter, when it comes to healthcare, right, when it comes to most of our education, and let's not neglect physical security, being safe in your home, being safe in the street. This is about local power and about local opportunities, right? And so when I think about the Islamic movement, or any movement for that matter, reprioritizing in this moment, right, it only reminds us, right, of how important that local power is. There's, again, this is not to discount the other types of work that people are doing. As much as I'm concerned about America, I'm in Turkey myself, and so most of my engagement is through communication and through the internet, and we do the best that we can. But the real work going forward, and I honor everyone who's doing that. And I do see a lot of masajid, a lot of mosques stepping up. I do see some Muslim communities stepping up to this. But we need more. Making sure that people have food, making sure people have shelter, healthcare. We have tremendous resources in many sectors of the Muslim communities in America.
Right.
Right. I won't buy into this myth that, all American Muslims are upper class and this and that. I know that's a myth with an agenda.
Right.
We are a divided community, of course.
Right.
But those that have a great opportunity now, and we should do that. We should think of it. I like that you said it's an opportunity. Absolutely. These are the times that we were warned of. This is a great time to be alive. I'm tremendously optimistic. I'm tremendously grateful to be alive now. I wouldn't want to live in an easy time. This is where we prove ourselves, and now it's a chance for Muslims in America to prove ourselves, I think.
That's right. Yeah. And speaking of Hillary Clinton, now that we have another option, almost equally
Contemptible, yeah, yeah,
probably even more distasteful than
yeah, yeah,
than Clinton was.
yeah, yeah,
Joe Biden, with his history
yeah,
in the U.S. Senate, and
horrible, yeah,
subhanallah, now you have this dichotomy once again. What has been the conversation in Turkey, and what are your views on this election that has now just culminated with Biden being the presumptive
yeah, yeah.
Democratic nominee for the presidency? What was the talk on the street like during the course of this campaign, with
Yeah,
Bernie Sanders in the wings and all of the stuff going on within the party to
undermine him at
kind of
any,
keep
yeah,
him?
yeah,
That's right,
yeah,
to
yeah,
undercut him.
yeah.
What has the discussion
As
been
a,
like there?
I will say, I saw
And your
someone,
thoughts?
I can't remember who said it, but someone said very accurately that Joe Biden's role in this campaign was not to beat Donald Trump, but to beat Bernie Sanders.
Interesting.
That was Joe Biden's job
Interesting.
in this campaign, is to keep,
Interesting.
because there's no way that Biden has a chance, right, against Donald Trump. But his job was to make sure that Bernie Sanders does not have a chance to defeat Donald Trump. I think that Sanders would have had a much greater chance of exciting enough people to go to the polls against Donald Trump. In
Now wait,
Turkey,
before you go
yeah,
any further,
sure,
let me pick your brain a little bit more on what you
sure,
just said. I have made it very clear that I cannot, in good conscience, cast a vote for Joe Biden, and of course not for Donald
mhm,
Trump. My focus is going to be on, who is running, from the city council and the board of education on up to the U.S. Congress.
yep, yeah,
Both
sure,
houses.
yeah,
That's my focus.
excellent,
But
yeah,
the presidency, I find them both equally distasteful.
yeah.
But with that said, you mean to say that in your opinion, given the level of distaste there is for Trump, that you don't think that Biden really has a chance of
I don't think so.
winning?
No, I mean, Trump has a golden opportunity here with this pandemic, and this is not the type of opportunity that we're talking about
Right, of
for
course,
ourselves.
of course
This
not.
is an opportunity for more power, and he seems to be seizing on it. He's a media icon. You know,
That
my
he is.
we received, well, my parents received on my behalf our stimulus check, which after all of that drama, literally has his name signed on the bottom of it. Unbelievable, unbelievable. I laughed. I laughed when I saw the picture of it. Like,
You mean to
um,
tell me you got a stimulus check, bro?
I did. Yeah, yeah. I'm way below. I'm way below that income bracket to earn it.
Uh,
Yeah. Um, so I did get a little something. I know it's just my money being returned to me in a much smaller form, um, but
I'm still waiting for mine.
you're still waiting for yours. Yeah, somehow it came
But I'm
in.
not holding my breath.
No, it's again. They either send it to you now or maybe they'll give it to you next year. But it's all a game anyway. But he's
Yeah.
playing the game. He's very good at
Yes,
playing
he
the game.
is. And he's very good at playing the game. Yes,
He's
he is.
very
Yes.
good. These daily press conferences, legendary. And I know the
That's one
coast,
way of describing him.
the coasts, laugh about it and they mock him and oh, actually, this would be a good resource to follow up. I've very thoroughly enjoyed. There was a piece of media that PBS had produced. There was two actually. One was on the rise of Trump. PBS Frontline. It was a long form documentary. Had produced maybe about an hour on the rise of Trump, and then there was another one that came out in the winter called, I think it was called The Great Divide,
Mm.
about, and that charted really from the late Obama years, or actually no, early Obama years. It covered both Obama's terms and Trump, and the entry of Trump. And one thing that they conveyed very effectively, I really appreciated that, was really, I mean, again, it's in the title, how divided America is. And I remember the way that they conveyed the way that liberal Americans laughed at Trump.
Mhm.
The shot was something like, it's like a view from above over New York City, over Manhattan buildings, right? And then you would just hear the voice of the late night talk shows, making jokes about Trump, and then, you know, the people laughing in the background. But to most of the country, that's all it is. You know, when you look at a map of the country, divided red and blue, right? Most of this country is not blue. You know, most of this country, when they see the liberals on the coasts, you know, mocking this president that they've come to love so much, right?
Yeah.
It only just stirs them even more. It only strengthens, you know, their position. Not that we shouldn't mock, of course. You know, of course we do our jobs, but we have to also understand, right, who it is, you know, that we think that we're working with, you know, in this American polity. But no, I think Trump has this in the bag. I would be shocked. Forget even if it were a fair election. I would be shocked if Joe Biden is even able to make it to November with his full sanity. Like the way he's unraveling already, like I really don't see that happening. I think, you know, these months, you know, between now and November, I see Joe Biden unraveling, which is also why I was furious, and I didn't expect to even feel this way at Bernie Sanders for throwing his hat. I mean, for backing out of this race so early in this primary election. You know, I don't spend a lot of time on presidential elections. That's not my role by any means. My expectations are very low for anyone in that position, for someone like Bernie Sanders as well. But he absolutely had some ideas that would have benefited a lot of people in America. He was obviously he was the best candidate. If you want to make America a better place than someone at that level of politics, then someone like Bernie Sanders, that's the obvious choice. It's not even really a question. And for him then, you know, to throw it to Joe Biden, you know, as if Joe Biden is even going to survive until November in one piece. I was really shocked, and showed a lack of judgment on his part. But no, I think Trump has it in the bag. I think Trump is doing another term from early on. I mean, I said this when he was first elected. I said Trump is doing, if he can survive, right? If he can, you know, maintain his physical health, you know, he's doing 8 years at least. If any president since FDR would have been able to extend his term past 2 terms, it would be someone like Donald Trump. The man is an icon, and that's terrifying. Of course, I'm not saying this to justify it or even to normalize that idea. But the man is good at what he does, and that's not politics. I mean, that's not serving the people. What he does is politics, and he's very good at it. So no, I think we're stuck with him. I agree with you. You know, there are some exciting younger people getting involved in politics. You know, sometimes I'll see, you know, our sister from New York, Ocasio-Cortez, you know, to see people like this, you know, stepping up into politics and you know, obviously their abilities are going to be limited. Obviously they're only going to be able to do so much. There's also a fair critique, right, of that level of politics, that you know, these people can become a controlled opposition, right, and undermine more radical thinking, right, around politics. I'm very much a student of that school. You know, I understand that. But I think, you know, the smaller, like we were talking about, the hyper local, you know, having a national, even a global vision, you know, is important. But then acting local, I think, is really where we're going to see. That's really where our investment has to be. I know we were talking about the presidential election, but you just made a very good point, though, about the importance of, about all of these other levels of politics, right, that the presidential elections distract us from. But just like a quick point, that I mean, on Turkey, you know, it's interesting that Turkey, in the first election, right, actually, I think would have leaned more towards Trump than Hillary Clinton. The Turks have no love for Hillary Clinton. They know, you know, they know all about her. And I think, especially because, you know, Trump became the conservative candidate, right? Remember, Turkey is a religious conservative country. They have a more leftist, socialist social policy, you know, in terms of, you know, economic policy, in terms of providing basic needs to its citizens. Imagine that. But in terms of religion, you know, they imagine themselves to be more conservative, right? And AK Party, Erdogan, right, is the conservative candidate, right, in Turkey. Whereas the more leftist anti-Islam candidates come from the coasts, right? And so I think Turks wanted to like Trump. I think Erdogan wanted to like Trump. And obviously, he did have some ties with the campaign. I know, what was the guy's name? Flynn was playing both sides maybe early on in those years. Anyway, but no, they also understand now, and they've seen in the years since, that a pharaoh is a pharaoh. Fir'aun is Fir'aun, and Trump is one of the best of them. And so I don't think they have any illusions, right, about him. We haven't really gotten a chance to have open conversations because of this last month. This all happened, Bernie Sanders throwing the, calling out of the race, and the primary being concluded, so to speak, has all happened within this last month of pandemic. But I don't know. I don't see it. With respect, I'm a student of Malcolm, of Imam Malcolm X. And I, in so many ways, I prefer the wolf to the fox. I see.
You know what you're dealing with. You know what you're dealing with.
Yeah. No illusion. I remember those white women taking the streets after that last election, the Women's March, saying that if Hillary Clinton had won, I'd be having brunch right now. And to me, there could have been no greater affirmation that Trump needed to be in the White House at that moment, right? To expose these contradictions, to take the face, to take Obama's polite, well-spoken, very charismatic face off of empire. Trump plays an important role right now. That's an opportunity. Trump is an opportunity for us if we can see it.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. I agree. Now, brother, we're winding down now. We just we just
ate up that hour.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, one of the good things of being the last show in the on this particular day is that we were able to extend the time beyond the 30-minute.
Okay, great. Well, my time is yours.
Right now, we're 40. We're good. A good 40 minutes in. Alhamdulillah,
great,
and that's all good. We still have that flexibility.
Great.
But what I didn't want to do was end this conversation without us giving some attention in this blessed month of Ramadan to our political prisoners.
Yeah, please. Yeah, thank you. Good.
This is a month when we need to do as much as we can to prick the conscience of those among us for whom this conversation of political prisoners is very inconvenient, very intimidating. They'd rather not have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
But this is the month for us to, tap into that reticence when it comes to these challenging issues, and not forget, that we have brothers and sisters that need our support. I'm wondering, what is the sense of again, the sense on the street in Turkey of America and this whole idea of political prisoners? Is there?
Yeah, they know. I think they do know.
Turkey that America has political prisoners, or does this just happen in other countries, not America?
No. Turks know. Turks know. Beginning with, maybe there's less knowledge, perhaps, about the legacy of the Black Power struggle, for example. So you can understand, that Turks might not entirely realize, they might not fully know that history and understand how many political prisoners, Black political prisoners, are still in prison today, after decades.
That's right. Many of them old and dying off.
Old and dying,
Yes.
And so there's a little bit less knowledge about that. And of course, we even though we often, it's not even though, because we talk about this struggle, from an Islamic perspective, we have to include the Black Power struggle and the Black political prisoners.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I know I'm not telling you anything, but I remind our audience. I think there's more knowledge in Turkey, at least, and around the Muslim world in my travels, of of the result of this war on terror, right? In terms of imprisoning innocent Muslims. I think, Dr. Aafia Siddiqi's name, may Allah free her, is well known in Turkey as well.
Well known in Turkey.
It's well known in
It's
Turkey.
well known in Turkey.
It's well known in Turkey.
Alhamdulillah.
Guantanamo is an iconic, example,
Yes,
of course. And
of
still,
course.
let's not forget the over 100, brothers who are still in on that prison camp in Guantanamo, Cuba. So this is known. The cases, the political prosecutions, are known, I think. Alhamdulillah, I mean, there was enough knowledge of this for President Erdogan and then Prime Minister Ahmed Davutoglu to, spend political chips to bring Dr. Sami El-Erian, who was beloved to us, a mentor of mine, to bring him to Turkey, right? These things don't come without costs. So for there to be a knowledge of that, that's very crucially important. Of course, there's the link with the Palestinian cause, which is very dear to the Turkish people as well. But I think there's some knowledge of it, right? In some ways, people are more comfortable speaking about this here than among American Muslims, right? Of course, there's the issue of power itself. Turks can talk about another government, and their political prisoners more comfortably than their own. The same way that American Muslims are very comfortable talking about oppressions, in India or China, but find it very difficult, to criticize their own government and its war on terror, especially after now 2 decades, right, of steady oppression and mind control. I mean, but no, it's a priority. In Ramadan, it's a priority. I mean, you mentioned Ibn Taymiyyah. Like, this is freeing the prisoners. Many of our scholars have talked about, how freeing the prisoners is one of the priorities of where we spend our money.
That's right.
Spending our charity, the money that we set aside. This has to be one of our closest priorities, one of our highest priorities. Right. This is an obligation on us, right, to give in order to free them. Obviously, it's not as simple as just buying their freedom. The American system is a little bit more intricately oppressive than that. But we have to do that work. And especially in the midst of this pandemic, it's been something I've been thinking about even more because of the call to free, some of the other, as many prisoners as possible, to get them to lower prison populations, because of course a pandemic can massacre a prison population. May Allah protect, all the sisters and brothers in prisons in America and around the world. Turkey freed almost a quarter of its prison population about 2 weeks ago because of about a fifth or a quarter of its prison population. 45,000 people. They just sent them home because of this pandemic to make sure it doesn't get out of hand. But the political prisoners don't get that chance. Even and America is doing some symbolic, they're having some symbolic conversations to try to get some people home early, but the political prisoners are not the ones who are being considered for that. Not by any means,
That's right. That's right.
And so it only, even as distracted as we are, in so many ways, this pandemic, makes us more self-centered and self-focused, than ever, because we're more concerned with our basic needs in our homes, and there's plenty of distractions. Some of them important, some of them not. But we can't forget our political prisoners, not for a moment. They need us more than ever. And so I always appreciate your voice, calling attention to that. Any chance that we get, any chance that I get, I try to, in my travels back to the US or anywhere, I've tried to call, my sisters and brothers, especially those who are, so involved in national politics, or think they are. So they think that they're involved in national politics, to at least have a clear sense of priorities. Right. That is as much as, we should oppose Islamophobia and hate speech and things like that. Honestly, sticks and stones. You can say anything you want about Islam. Like, Trump can say anything he wants from that podium. If you can stop killing us and you can free our captives, right? We can have a reset. I think we can have a reset of relations. But until that point, honestly, it's the social contract that the U.S. Constitution supposedly represents, right, is being broken. Every minute that passes is the U.S. government breaking that contract, right? And so we need to really rethink, how how we can secure the freedom of our political prisoners, the Muslims, and all of those are unjustly imprisoned as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
And give them the reparations for these many, many years that they've spent in cages. Allah free them all.
Ameen. Okay, my brother, I think this is a very, very good place to stop this conversation.
No, really appreciate your time. Thank you for having me on here. Always at your service, as you know, Brother Saalakhan. Always at your service. Thank you for having me in, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. May Allah bless you, brother, for making the time to be with us. Is there any last point that you'd like to make that we didn't touch upon before we close out?
We covered a lot of ground. I would just, remind our people who I know have anxiety in their hearts that this too shall pass, right? And that this is part of life. This is what we're here for, right? So continue to struggle and ask Allah to accept. That's it.
Thank you, my brother.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wal asr innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amalu salihati wa tawassaw bil haqq wa tawassaw bis sabr. Thank you, my brothers and sisters, friends of Salam Media, friends of El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan, friends of Facebook. Thank you for joining us for this episode. I pray to Allah that you got as much out of it as I did. May Allah Ta'ala bless your night. Those of you in the other hemisphere, bless your day or your night, and may Allah bless you to have a peaceful night's rest. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.